Speaking of times of our lives, though, wild
Oh
cards.
yeah, it doesn't get more fun than
I
that.
know. I okay. I don't know how you feel about it, but it might be my favorite episode of the season so far.
I've said that about every single one I've watched so far, and this one is no exception to it. My goodness, did they not hold back with this one?
It is so fun, and I did though expect that Ellis had some undercover experience, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Like okay, but I mean, it's just I really appreciated how Ellis and Max are really on the case. Like whenever they get into being able to investigate, their ideas of what to do are always so fun, but they also push the plot forward in terms of finding out what is happening within the case. And yes, that's the point of the episode. But we've watched so much television and some mysteries, and you know that sometimes the lead characters aren't functioning the way you want to function in the show. And for them, they really do. They bring it home and bringing the laughs. It was so funny.
It was. I have to say, this is the episode that was probably the wackiest, but at the same time, the most serious as far as undercurrents go. We went the most off the wall with storylines yet, but at the same time, we got to the crux of some of the center storylines going on in the background, and with some through some serious conversations. And I think that it got the balance just right. Obviously, on a show like this, it's going to lean towards silly a bit more, and that works for the show beautifully. Um, the whole like yes, we got to see Alice go undercover. I saw the promos. It was all about that. But we also got to see Max do what she does best as Marcy. And my goodness, did Vanessa own that role? Um, I tell you, between watching right from the off when we saw that, like we've seen the scene on the trailer all the time. Let's be honest, the scene with Alice running with the surfboard towards the water, seeing just Max and the Chief go, oh my God, in slow motion. I was like, I'm going to love this episode. And like I that feeling didn't change the whole way. Every arc this thing tackled was bonkers but brilliant at the same time.
It's it is so great. And I think it's because it's there's just something about the lingering on a moment that really can bring the funniness.
Yeah.
I mean it is just it's supposed to be fan service, but it's
hmm
also used as a joke, but it also moves the plot forward. It's very smart writing. And like you're right about the undercurrent of seriousness too, because in the middle of all the wackiness, besides the seriousness of the case, excuse me.
Yeah.
Besides the seriousness of the case, we also got to learn that Ellis and Lee used to be close. And what happened on the case that got him demoted is the reason why they aren't anymore. And the story he tells Max about his brother was real.
hmm
And it just felt, I was like, oh, he's his younger brother, his 10 years younger brother. I'm hurt even more. I'm just like hurt even more about what happened to him because it seemed like Ellis in some ways raised his brother.
Yeah. And that goes a long way in highlighting this episode because there were a lot of routes this episode could have taken, and I'm glad it didn't because there was the whole idea of whether you don't believe Alice was, or you surely believe Alice was framed with those drugs. He wasn't really doing them or selling them or anything like that when they were found. And another show might have raised some doubts because then Max was like, wait, why aren't you calling it in when Alice found drugs? And I was like, is this going to suggest that he's getting too close again and he has a thing for maybe drugs or something because he's not dealing? It didn't go there because Alice then convinced her about how the way the law works that you need to have some evidence that there was a murder involved. And she was like, I gotcha. I was like, I love this partnership so much. She never once doubted him, even though there were opportunities in the story. If we're going on what network TV passed, there were opportunities in the story for her to doubt him, and she didn't. She listened to the story about his brother. She listened to his history with his partners. She listened to his history with the chief. And yet she was still on his side through and through, despite the fact they bicker, they argue, they some occasionally rub each other up the wrong way. And yet she's his most loyal supporter. I love it so much. And like this episode, it never gets old. It really doesn't.
It doesn't, which is why Alice needs to get on the we're partners train.
Yes. You see, when he
He's,
said we're not partners again, I was like, didn't we go over this last week?
I know, like, don't let this be a running theme, Ellis, because you clearly are partners. And Max is such a great support. It was great at the end of the episode, just to jump to the end, because she risks her life for the
Yeah.
case, and he has to save her. And she takes responsibility,
hmm
and she wants Lee to know, like, hey, it's not on him. Though I did appreciate that Chief Lee was like, he's the seasoned officer, so it's on him regardless, because that's true. She is the civilian. Ellis has to be the one who gets her to understand truly how dangerous these situations are. But it also opened the conversation. Like we got so many layers of characterization there. Between, I mean, we already knew Max is a person who's very loyal. But
Hmm.
just to see it in action for Ellis again was just wonderful. And then to see that actually Chief Lee is more so protecting the community by keeping Ellis from being a detective because of whatever was going on. I really want to know how messed up Ellis must have been during this casework. Uh, that a by the books officer was going off the rails to the point that the chief that's close to him was like, no, I'm demoting you
Hmm.
because it's just too much. Like how bad was it? Like, I really, really want to know.
I know we've said on this pod many times that flashbacks are a convenience of the narrative that we don't necessarily need, and this show certainly doesn't need them. However, I feel like if we do keep this storyline a bit of a secret, the longer it goes on, maybe in like a penultimate episode, an episode that has flashbacks to whatever did happen in Ellis's time on that case, and of course everything he was going through, it might really benefit the story because it would show you how he got to this point, how his life turned around in such a way. I think that might be beneficial. I'm not sure the show would do it, and I'm not even sure it's necessary because the show utilizes dialogue so well. But it's interesting to think about. Ellis was obviously in a very, very dark place back then. And even though like he's not where he wants to be in his career now, he's in a different place now. So it would have been interesting to see how he made it from the point A to point B. But with someone like Max in his life, I'm sure that information is going to come out one way or another, and we're going to get it. But it is interesting to think about how a flashback could be serviced in a story like that.
It would be because I wouldn't want it to be the whole episode where we spend
No,
the
no, no.
episode a year prior, but I would, like to see elements of what it was that he was dealing with, in terms of obviously it was the grief from losing his brother, but like how he was navigating that in the workplace to the point where, his relationships, but he burned bridges. That's very
Hmm.
clear. Simmons and Yates have a field day just, ragging on him. Lee doesn't trust him. So like what exactly happened? I know Simmons gives some of the backstory. But I was like, Simmons, we don't really know you, sir. And you
Yeah.
and Yates still didn't really provide much to this case
Yeah.
in comparison to Max and Ellis.
I like that we got to see at least Simmons reeled into the main storyline a bit because hopefully, I hope we just don't go back to cracking jokes at his expense after this because there was at least some kind of repair done to their friendship. It might never be what it was, but like they can get along again, which is important. So I just hope we don't revert. Yates, on the other hand, just comes off like a caricature. We need more from her. Like she makes facial expressions when someone argues with her. She cracks silly jokes just to try to pull one over on other people. I feel like we could maybe have a wee bit more from her. So maybe we will get it at some point because we don't really know what role she plays in the overall story, other than being Simmons' new partner. And the chief now, for example, I thought he was shaping up to be a bit of a one-dimensional character as well. Um, because he keeps reverting back every week. It's, oh, you did kind of well, and then it's, who are you? Why are you here? You're not on our payroll. Um, so like, but this week we and Max got through to him, and we saw that he does think very highly of Alice. He's just trying to protect him. I love that. I really love that. Of course, it went back to next time knock. He was grumpy and all because that's who he is. It went back to that at the end for humorous purposes, but there is a character under there, and I hope we get to bring him out. We're doing the same thing with Simmons, probably even better with Simmons. I hope Yates is next because what is that character's purpose other than like I said, standing around and cracking jokes? Um, but this episode was probably the most beneficial for the ensemble cast because we know obviously Max and Alice are the two main characters, but they have to interact with some people other than themselves. Because I think my biggest concern with this episode was that when Alice was going undercover, it was going to separate him and Max quite a bit, and the show's strongest dynamic is theirs. So I was like, oh, don't know how to feel about that. But actually, no, they got to do a lot of it together between the stakeout. Max was like, I've waited my whole life for this moment. And then she was falling asleep. Love that for her. Alice was like, don't go in there. Max was like, sure thing, boss. And then, that's boring. Let's go on in there. We just got to see how, like, I was going to say how what such a wild card she is. That makes sense. It is wild cards after all. But like it's just such a unique partnership and it functions so well. And they are such opposites of each other. And I think that's why it works so well.
Yes, and I think also that there's great use of technology here to service. Like the scenes all seem to match up well in terms of they all were necessary. So like yes, we're spending a lot of time on the phone. But they service each other where well, like you have a phone scene, but then you also have a scene where you're in the car, where they're in the car. They're talking
Hmm.
directly to each other. And it does pull Simmons in, which was good because it also Ellis had to ask for help. But he
Hmm.
doesn't I didn't really get the feeling from him that he likes doing that. But he
Yeah,
asked multiple times, and I believe in every case it was because he needed help with Max.
I think that's right. Yeah. It was just says a lot about he actually, I'm sure he thinks a lot of Max and he wouldn't admit that right now, but you saw in the end he was a little bit shaken by the fact that she could have been in some serious trouble.
Yes, which like yes, saved each other again because she saved him in the wine episode, which
Yeah.
was that last week? No, the week before
I
that.
yeah.
Um,
Um Last week.
or last
I
week.
was at first I was like, no, 2 weeks ago, it was last week.
Thanks. So she saved him last week at the winery, and he has now saved her. So we're a couple that saves each other, which is really nice.
Love
I mean,
it.
that's part of the dynamic for shows like this, but it is just nice to see that they're seeding it early and that the stakes of saving each other are pretty high. I mean, I was loving the scene when she's at the cliff. That CGI water got me. I was, I was because there's just something about television grade graphics that feels so comfortable and heartwarming. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
need to look amazing. It's not on streaming, but seeing the water there, I was like, that's not real.
I know
And
you could see the blur around her as well when she was looking over it. But you know
it,
what? I love network TV so
I
much for that
know.
reason.
Well, I was like, yes, this is network TV. This is what we're used to. Because it feels, everything doesn't have to be big budget. And there's just something
No.
about being able to keep the emotion and the high stakes of a scene, but also being a viewer who's like, I know she's not on the edge of this
Yeah.
cliff, but it's so lovely that you are giving me what you can to make it look like she is.
Right. And it got what even added to that was the fact that Max, throughout the whole harrowing situation, never once lost her Marcy accent. Not a single one. She was like, "Oh God, final words. I don't know what to say. Police." Just absolute the commitment to the character. We always say that she never takes things too seriously, but she does deep down, and I'm sure deep down she was taking that situation very seriously. But she was going to protect her cover right to the end. You know what? Respect, because she pulled it off. I love that woman so much.
I know. There was up until the scene with her, them wanting to stage a suicide, it was nothing but wacky. That is not, and it's just so delightful to see that. Like from the moment she enters, first it's a cranberry company that she has to infiltrate. Second, it's like talking to I guess is she the lead secretary or the manager? I couldn't really figure out who
Yeah,
Kathy is.
I feel like she was at one point deputy manager and she thought she was going to be promoted and wasn't. So of course she hired the surfer to go and take out her new boss so that she could get the role because why the heck not, right?
I know. And then the thing that gets them caught is that they couldn't resist being intimate one last time before they hit the road. And she's just in Max in the vent, just she's like, oh, I mean, it's kind of cute if there wasn't murder. I said, girl, you don't climb your way out of this vent. Or I did appreciate though that Ellis was like, did you record it? And she's like, I'm on the phone with you. How am I recording this
And
entire conversation?
finally, someone understands how technology works on television.
Yes, instead of like, oh yeah, I have it. How would she have gotten that? She's on the phone. But I mean, it just and there's the silliness of it. Like she even goes to karaoke because it's part of the cover. She's
Oh,
deep
I
in it
love that
now.
so much. I love that. And all we needed to see was the loud noise and the karaoke sign above her. Why not? But yeah, the commitment. She never once stopped in that role. I actually kind of liked the friendship she was striking up with Kathy. So I was like, oh, come on, Kathy. Not you pointing a gun at your new bestie. Come on now. So unserious. But yeah, and yet totally believable just because of you'd expect it from these characters.
Yes, and I mean the like you had mentioned before though the accent that really drawl that honey. Just like, well, I mean, I appreciate everything that you've done for us. And I'm like, girl, like, it's like you would have thought Kathy would have picked up on it. It's
But
just
no.
there's just no way.
No, I hate to say it. I kind of knew Kathy was going to play a major role. We always do CW Actor Watch. I knew Kathy was going to play a bigger role because that actress has played a lawyer, I think, on both Supergirl and Arrow in the past.
Okay.
So I was like, I know, yeah. So you're definitely going to have something bigger. And of course, Kathy did. I didn't expect Kathy to have such a like bad guy heel turn, but I mean, like. We say about how committed Max was. Kathy was committed to getting that job, but nothing was going to stop her. Not even murder, apparently. Um, but I mean, like, yeah, such a goofy world of characters, yeah, totally believable.
Yes, she's my favorite villain so far, I believe.
Yeah, me too. Me too. The desperation, just do it. Yeah,
And then she like I think that's Chili, right? The surfer who
yeah.
she gets mad at him and he's like, I love you too, Kathy. As they're leaving. It's like, no, you were serviceable for Kathy. She was gonna like leave with the money and you would never have heard from her again, sir.
Meanwhile, Kathy was like, "You idiot!" Oh God, what a dynamic.
I know. Which speaking of dynamics though, Ellis and Max at the end of the episode.
Hmm.
That I love the boat scenes between them. I like that he tried to check in with her, which she did. She did appreciate that, but it is interesting that that is a wall for her.
Hmm.
We don't emotionally like spew our feelings, apparently, in terms of things that hurt us, which brought me back to the scene where she immediately wanted to shut Ellis down about her parents.
Hmm.
And it's like, Max, are you an avoider? Are you a bottler? Because I'm hearing bottling tendencies. If we're it's just like, I move on. It's like, you move on, do you?
Hmm.
Or does it just sit in the back?
I did wonder about that as well because it felt like she was kind of brushing it off for his sake. But I'm like, okay, but we've seen this before where a character brushes it off so that the person around them won't feel bad about it. But actually, it has stayed with them. Again, this is network TV, so I don't know if we'll just move on to an adventure of the week next week. But I do feel like there will be that moment where she will something will resonate with her that oh my goodness, this could have happened. I mean, she does take things seriously, but maybe that it's not as fun as I was expecting it to be. In the same way as kind of like the stakeout, for example, she was like, this is not as fun as it's portrayed on TV because she was falling asleep. I feel like it with much more serious consequences. Like she did experience that in this episode where something could have gone horribly wrong. Thankfully, it didn't. Um, but I did like the fact that Alice is like frosty. He's getting less. He's thawing out the more the season goes on. But there was definitely a warmth there in the way he tried to kind of look through her. And it was like, "Are you sure you're okay?" With kind of like a warm smirk on his face, just to let her know that he was there if she needed him. She didn't take the option because she kind of deflected that, and then again made it all about him so that she could teach him some dance moves. And I mean, like that's Max in a nutshell. And again, the episodes end in the most unusual of ways. Just that nice little fade out and then cut and it's gone. It's so nice. I feel like after we always say the show's quite unserious, but it does deal with some relatively heavy topics. So after a case of the week, it's always nice to just blow off some steam with a fun, laugh out loud kind of moment. And they did it again very, very well.
And it was our second dance.
Yes, it
They
was.
danced in Ride and Max danced in Wild Cards. And I love the inclusion of Mark too. Because Alice was like, I didn't invite you. She's like, Mark did. And she just has the food. And I think the dancing, how they see those in shows. At some point, we're going to see Alice dance.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be wonderful.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. I was like, I don't know if it might be too soon to see it now, and it was, but it's definitely going to come back up at some point. I was obsessed with the fact that Max was like, "Oh, don't worry, Mark's not watching it." We cut off, and Mark was literally looking it off in the opposite direction. I was like, this cat is an actor." I loved it so much. Um, uh, but I was getting very disappointed throughout this episode because my one criticism was going to be we haven't had a Mark sighting yet, but then he showed up at the end, and I was so happy. Um. Oh yeah, I couldn't love this episode more. It ticked all the boxes for me.
I know. I mean, so it's 8 episodes or 10. I can't remember.
I want to say 10, I think.
Okay. So, well then, yeah, it's 10 then because that makes sense for the next episode because Alice's ex is in town.
Ah, yes, yes. I saw the promo
Yes.
last night.
Fun. This is gonna be fun. Max looks so intrigued though. Like
Dead.
she was very much like, so do y'all have a little thing going on back there?
Yeah, I loved it. She was like the child in the back of the car, like, watching the parents go back and forth. She was just so intrigued by this dynamic. But we've seen this before. I keep saying that. I love the show. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's using the wheel in new ways. Um, we've seen this before where the new partner is kind of intrigued by an old partner, but maybe halfway through the episode they feel a certain kind of way about it, and then they have to reconcile with that. And I'm like, is this the episode where Max is going to feel a certain kind of way about this? I mean, this show keeps surprising us. I feel like this could happen, but at the same time, I totally buy out if it didn't.
True, but I think they'll do it, but it won't be because of romantic feelings. I think it would be because Ellis might listen to his ex. And he
Mm,
doesn't always listen to Max in the field.
yeah, it's true. And they could hide behind the fact that Max doesn't like being pushed out by his old work partner or someone he can work well with. So we could always do that, that she doesn't like being pushed out of the work bubble. But maybe now and then in about 6 seasons, when we look back on it, we're like, oh no, that was foreshadowing that she didn't like being pushed out of his life in general.
No, like underline work, work. This is a work discussion. I am mad at you because of work.
Yep. Keep telling yourselves that, besties.
All right, well, we should end here for wild cards. I felt like it's just so great to be on this journey with the show. And you notice we laughed through the entire pod about the episode. Usually we're laughing because of the things that we say, but it is a lot about
Yeah.
the episodes. And I think it's just so good that the TV is just so feel good.
Oh, very much so. I love these shows and I love Wildcard so much. It's so take a drink every time someone says unserious. It's so just bonkers and off the wall, and just to be able to sit and back and chill out and enjoy watching it and then enjoy our conversations about it. I think that's what television's all about, and this show understands that. 101, 100%. It just gets it down to the ground. I cannot believe we're approaching the halfway of that season. I do not want us to approach the halfway of that season, but at the same time, I cannot wait to see where it goes from here, because this was the episode it definitely started to delve into that backstory. And I guess it's only going to get more as it goes on. So yeah, I'm in this show for the long haul because, oh, once we saw the trailer, we knew it was going to be a good one, but I love it so much.
I know.